Tim from Idaho wants to know about flood insurance in Florida.
This is a question I get often, so I think this is worth spending a minute on. Why don't you start with this, Mike?
Well, before it was weird. Like you would have houses that are on the water, and they were in an X flood zone, and they were paying $600, and you have houses out west, 5-6 miles from the coast, and they were paying $1,200 or $1,500. Now it makes a little bit more sense. They changed the flood maps. The more coastal you are, the more you're going to pay for flood, unfortunately, because the big risk here in Florida for flood insurance is storm surge. So storm surge, even though that's caused by a hurricane, that is going to come from your flood policy. So, that's kind of the most confusing part about flood. It's not like a traditional policy where it's cause of loss. So like the hurricane caused the loss, so it goes on the hurricane policy. No, if it's rising water in any way, shape, or form, other than like your pipes, which would be water damage from your homeowners policy, it's going to go on the flood. So, rain, just rain falling down and it piles up, comes in the house, that's going to be flood, or storm surge, or a tsunami. All that stuff's going to be considered flood. Really that's the rule of thumb. The closer to the coast you are, the more expensive it's going to be, but it's very hit or miss. So you essentially just need the address to do a quote. If you're looking at a house and you're concerned about the flood insurance, call your agent, just give them the address. It doesn't take more than 10 minutes to do a quote. He should be able to do it with you right on the phone. Just go, I'm looking at this house. Here's the address. Okay, this is the flood price. That's it. It shouldn't take more than 10 minutes.
So high level, flood insurance is a separate policy from your homeowners policy. If we're just talking basic residential real estate right now, right? It gets different as you get into commercial, right? So but we won't go there. So this will be just resi stuff. So flood policy, you can get that quoted without doing a 4-pointer or a wind mate. You don't need those documents.
You don't need an elevation certificate anymore like you did back in the day. It's just straight geocoding, which is the location of the home, and they know the elevations of the area and the likelihood that it's going to flood. And essentially, they're looking at hurricanes here in Florida. It's going to be like, okay, if a hurricane hits, what's the likelihood this house is going to flood?
So do you need flood insurance everywhere? This is the
No. I mean, if you're in an X flood zone, you're not going to be required to have flood. You could still get it if you want. It's definitely an option, and they tend to be a lot less expensive. Like $900 to $500 a year if you depending on where the house is located. But it's completely up to you whether you want it. Now, if you are in a flood zone and you're getting a loan, you got to have flood. It's the way it is. The bank's not going to let you not have flood.
Exactly. So if you're financing a property and you're in anything but an X flood zone, then bank is going to, in almost all cases, require you to get flood insurance.
Right.
When you are not in an X flood zone, so when you're in a flood zone, your flood insurance will be higher than if you were in an X flood zone. Right. If you buy a property cash, you do whatever you want. Yeah. That's kind of the theme here. Cash is king. That's what it is. So when you and I thought this was interesting. Like this is what people get confused a lot. They think like breaking pipes in a house is flood, but it's not. That's under your homeowner's insurance policy. That's right. I want to just double click on that for you for anyone that's listening. It's really more about, like you said, storm surge and rain accumulating.
Nature has to cause the flood.
What about if I get a roof leak?
Water damage. That's another thing. If there's a water damage sublimitation on your policy and you have a roof leak, you're only getting $10,000 for that. That's
And so these are all the little things that can differentiate the cost of your premium. And this is why you need someone to explain the differences, because it's not super clear when you get the different policies that come over and the quotes.
Right.
So what I tell people who are like worried about flood, they think Florida, they think flood. Right. And so first we need to differentiate it like we just did. Roof leak is not flood insurance. It's different. Pipes breaking, different. That's homeowners. So I think you differentiate it, and that helps you understand your risk tolerance, because insurance is a risk tolerance question in most cases, unless the bank's requiring it.
Right.
And so you need to decide what's comfortable for you. Yeah. And so that's where, like, you spend some time with Mike and you talk through the process and what you care about and what the cost associated with that would be. But once you get to that phase of like, okay, I understand it. Should I have flood? I mean, I would tell you most buyers who are in a X flood zone, they're not getting flood insurance here in Florida. Like almost never.
There's another thing to consider, because even if you're in an X flood zone and you get a citizens policy, if it's over a certain amount of coverage, I believe it's either 500 or 400,000 now, and it's going down every year, the amount of coverage, they're going to require you to have flood in order to have a citizens policy. So that's another thing to take into account. Even if you're in an X flood zone, if you're getting over a certain amount of coverage, Citizens is going to make you have flood, even with an X flood.
So this right here is why I make the phone call to you every time I get into a discussion about what do we need to do insurance-wise. It's because you guys know better day by day what is actually happening in this insurance market, and this is a perfect example. All of a sudden now, Citizens is requiring flood insurance for a certain coverage limit.
And if you're in a flood zone, regardless of the coverage amount, you are required to have flood with Citizens.
So again, and I don't care if you're cash, your finance, whatever. I mean, finance is going to require it, but if you're cash and you're getting Citizens insurance, then you're getting flood. So that's very interesting, right? And so that's something to keep in mind too when you're thinking about flood policies. I tend to, people who reach out to me that are like very concerned about flood in general, I share, there's a website you can go to, you can see who's in an X or not flood zone. It varies. It fluctuates. You can see it. It's kind of wild. Like you might have a house here that's not in a flood zone. The house next door is. And so you just,
you could buy a house and half the yards in a flood zone, half the yards not.
So one of my buildings, I just did this with Anthony the other day, it was a 5-acre parcel we just closed on in December, and we were just talking about which buildings. There's 10 buildings on the parcel. Which buildings require flood, which don't, and we were talking through. Okay, well that one flood zone, like 5% of it touches. We need flood. The bank's going to require that. Okay, and so we went through the list, and it's like, okay, 7 of the 10 buildings are technically going to be required to have flood because of these things. So to your point, it's a little tricky, but it's not something we stress about down here as real estate brokers. It's not a big deal, in our opinion. But this is insurance is a risk tolerant, a personal question.
In Broward, it's more of a thing. You get floods in Broward. It's a little bit more low lying for whatever reason. So, especially like in Fort Lauderdale, there's certain sections that flood. So you got to be a little careful. And, you buy a house and it's got 3 flood claims on it. They don't disclose that to you. And next thing you know, a big storm hits and there's 2 feet of water in your house or a foot of water in your house. And you're like, what the hell?
And so an experienced real estate agent who's selling in these markets can quickly identify these things for you.
Check that disclosure form.
Right? The disclosure form, and if you're, I can call it out. I have clients that reach out to me about specific areas, and I'm like, hey, just want to flag for you. This place has been underwater like 4 times in the last 5 years, right? So like, just like, it's great. They're beautiful homes, huge mansions in some of these areas, and yet it's flooding. So
the first floor is temporary.
So think of it like that and make your decisions accordingly. Again, this is why an experienced team really, really matters. All right. Hopefully that answers your question on how to think about flood insurance here in Florida.